Working today on our 400 SEL, 1993 400 SEL. Just removed the oil filter. It's a very peculiar oil filter. These are pretty expensive. You can see this little thing on the top there. This is actually a little handle so that you can extract it. So this is the top of the oil filter. It's the bottom that plugs into a pipe down there. And this is the cap for the oil filter, and it goes on the passenger side. You can see I've got the new one down there now. There we go. Passenger side, just beneath the valve covers, right in front of the exhaust. And the little kit that I got from CarQuest comes with new rubber and a new washer for the oil plug. On this car, both the oil plug and the long bolt, this is the bolt that goes down through the filter into the engine. Very long bolt. Both of them are 13 millimeter. Very small. Usually I find that most oil drain are typically larger, 17, 19 millimeter. This is rather small, 13 millimeter. So I've already got it draining under there. Drain very easy to get to. I didn't have to jack the car. Just on the back side here, you can see right where it's dripping right there. Just on the very back side of the oil pan. Got a small 13 millimeter plug. Pulled that after we've been driving it, so it was nice and warm. You always want to do an oil change on a warm car. The oil will run out better. And the rubber on this still looks nice and new, and so I think it was probably changed by the previous owner because it's still good and supple, no cracking or anything, so I'm not going to bother with changing it. But there are two gaskets. If you have any bit of cracking, you should go ahead and replace them. These look practically new, so I'm just going to leave what's on there. It's fine. When you put on new gaskets, make sure that you rub your fingers with some of the old oil and oil them down real good so they don't get brittle when they get hot. And so this is looking good. So once you have put the new one back on, it's just a matter of setting the cap back on there. It should look about like that. And then putting the bolt back in, tightening it down. Of course, you don't want to strip it. Nice and snug, but not over tight. Same thing goes for the oil plug. Here I removed the intake boot just so I could get a better shot. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it is a little easier to get up in there. Do note that the cap, because the system was just run, so it was rather warm, was very, very hot, and I didn't want to extract it with my fingers, so I used this oil filter wrench, which I'm a big fan of, this kind. This is my favorite kind, to grab it and extract it. But pretty straightforward. One thing that I always like to do with oil changes, which I'm about to do in just a moment here, once I get the filter nice and tight, is I'm going to run, while the plug is out, I'm going to run some Marvel Mystery Oil through the system to bathe it and flush it out a little bit. That just helps to make sure it gets all the grime and grit and whatnot out of it. But otherwise, the oil was not terribly bad. This car does eat a little bit of oil. I've been meaning to at some point do the valve cover gaskets and the valve seals themselves, which is a bit of an operation, so I've been kind of lazy and not wanting to do it. So it is consuming a little bit of oil. With that scenario, the reason I'm quite sure it's the seals is that the more you drive it, it really doesn't eat a lot of oil as long as you're driving it daily. If you park it for a little while and then run it, you'll see a small cloud of smoke when you turn it on. The reason being, when it's at high vacuum, the oil is circulating in the system, everything's fine. The reason it leaks is when it sits and the oil settles and seeps in through the valve seals, and so then when you start the car, it goes and farts out a cloud of smoke. So I'm quite sure that it's the seals. It's not a bad drain. Probably putting about a quart in every 1,000 miles or so, top it off. Pretty much every time we get, we've been driving it a lot, so about every 300 miles, which is about what we're putting on it weekly. I check it whenever we fill up the gas, and about every 2 to 3 gas fill ups, so about every 1,000 miles, I put in half a quart to a quart, and that seems about the consumption rate. So it is something I can live with, but at some point I'll want to fix that. But as oil changes goes, this was pretty straightforward. The only peculiarity is the fact that it doesn't have the canister style, that just screws on straight to the block. Rather, it's got this permanent canister with the internal style filter, so a little bit different. And so when you look at the engine, you might think that that is where the oil filter is, because on some cars, like our BMW 740, it's positioned on the front of the engine up top like that, but not so with this. It's kind of hidden down there, but not terribly hard to get to. You will need an extension, a nice long extension to get to it. That's about the only trick. Again, 13 millimeter. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. Just, as long as you know these couple of little quirks, not a difficult operation to do yourself.